Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah, and in today's video I will be teaching you how to crochet. And what I mean by this is if you have never picked up a hook before in your life and you have no idea how to start, I will be teaching you how to start today. I will be showing you how to crochet a small plushie. I don't have one on me. I'll put a photo up on the screen, but it is a popping mushroom. This video is really popular on my YouTube channel, so I figured, how about I do a beginner tutorial on how to crochet that. So we'll actually be using a different material for the popping mushroom today than what I use in my original tutorial. And the reason we're using a different material is that it'll be easier to learn with this material first rather than with the plushie yarn that I am using. That yarn can be really difficult to work with. This is going to be a pretty lengthy video, but I will be chopping things up into sections so you can pause or you can skip to where you need. So we're going to begin by going through our material list. So if you haven't gone shopping yet, good. I'm going to walk you through what you should probably purchase while you're at a craft store, or you can order these things online as well. We're going to start with the yarn. We're going to move on to our essential tools and materials, and then some optional things, some things you can swap out if you don't have the time or the ability to get stuff. So we're first going to start with our yarn. So I will be working with a size 4 acrylic yarn. This is the yarn label for this yarn, and we're going to walk you through what these things mean real quick. So you have your name of the yarn, and if you roll it around, you'll see the color/name. Now this says light gray because I don't have the labels for these, but it would say red or some sort of cream color on there. Now if you continue rolling around, we will see this right here. Now this is our weight, so how much yarn is in here, and you can go by any one of these. Depending on the part of the world you're on, you might not have yards like I do. I live in the US, so I have the yards, but then I also have all of these for anyone else. So then we have our materials. So this is made out of 100% acrylic. Another good thing to start with might be cotton. Some types of polyester can be easy to work with, but I highly recommend acrylic to start with. It's got a little bit more of a spring to it than cotton does, so it might be easier to start working with. And now we see here we have a knitting needle symbol and a crochet hook symbol. Now if you read just above this, this is the recommended hook size for this yarn is 5.5 millimeter. We will not be working with the 5.5 for this pattern because that will be a little too big for crocheting amigurumi. You'll need to use a smaller hook size or your holes will be too big, which we'll talk about the crochet hook sizing in just a minute. We're gonna go right here. You see the medium 4, that's the weight of the yarn. You can get a bigger weight if you'd like, so a 5 or a 6, but just keep in mind those bigger sizes might be a little harder to work with when you're using it as a beginner. And then all of these symbols here are washing instructions, so you can just look up the laundry instructions for these. All yarns are going to be different. I usually like to wash my yarn in just cool water and air dry. That's how I like to do it. That way you don't have to worry about any of this. But if you're curious about your particular yarn, you can look up the laundry symbols. That's about all the information you're going to need for picking a ball of yarn. I buy my yarn from Hobby Lobby, this acrylic yarn that is. They have a huge selection. I love this yarn. You can also get cotton if you don't want to use acrylic. So now we're going to move on to the crochet hooks. So I will be using a 4 millimeter hook today, and I will be using a metal crochet hook. Now you can use any crochet hook you'd like. I highly recommend metal crochet hooks. They're easier to work with. The yarn slides on it a little bit better. But certain plastic ones can also be good, like this one. They do tend to fall apart faster than metal because you are doing wear and tear as you work. The plastic will wear down and sooner or later the tip will pop off. So you can avoid that by using metal for a very, very long time. So you will also need a pair of scissors. You can use any kind of scissors. I'm using some specific craft scissors, but you can just use whatever you have on hand for right now. Now we're gonna go through our sewing needles. Now, for the pattern we're working on today, they aren't essential, but they will make the process easier. So there's a bunch of different kinds, different lengths. When you're beginning, These ones might be easier, but you also can find these ones. Anything with a big enough eye to stick the yarn through. And that isn't too sharp because you don't want it to get hooked in between the yarn fibers, or it'll be really hard to pull through, if that makes sense. So pick up some sort of needles if you can find them. They are essential for when you get more into crocheting. I'll be showing you how you can avoid these to begin with for today's pattern. Another optional piece for crocheting would be a stitch marker. So you don't actually need these. What you can use instead is some scrap yarn, some pieces of yarn in a different color. You can use that instead, or if you have bobby pins, you can use those as well. I like to use these because they can close and they aren't going to come off unless you open them again. You could also find smaller ones, but I find they're really hard to close when compared to the big ones. So if you have the ability to, I highly recommend these type of stitch markers. Now, the next material on our list is stuffing. So I use a stuffing called polyester fiber fill, and it looks like this. Now, for this pattern, we're only going to be using a tiny bit. So you can get away with stuffing it with some extra yarn. If you can't find this right now, you can get them from most stores in general, and you can also order it too. But if you don't have it on hand right now, you can just use some yarn. The next item on our list are safety eyes, and these are little plastic eyes with backing. These are completely optional. You do not need them at all for today's pattern. They do add some cuteness. Let me see if the camera can focus, but for the most part, you don't need these. You can stitch eyes on, which I'll also be walking you through if you don't have safety eyes. You do not need these, so keep that in mind when you're picking up your materials. You do not need them. You can just sew the eyes on. I believe that is it for the material list. So when you go shopping, those are the things you'll need. You'll need, for sure, a crochet hook, some yarn, and sewing needles if you want to make life easier. They're not a necessity. Highly recommend though. And a pair of scissors, which you don't need to go out and buy new ones. Real quick, before we get into the pattern, if you are working with the yarn in a different size, I have a little rule of thumb for how to size your crochet hook to it. This is if you don't want to go out and buy new materials, if you already have them on hand. What I like to do for crocheting plushies is to use the same size hook as the size yarn. Now this isn't going to work for every yarn, but it is a good place to start, especially in the beginning. You can just use a 4mm with the size 4 yarn. Another rule of thumb would be to take the recommended size and take it two sizes down. So instead of a 5.5, you'd use a 3.5. Those are two easy ways to figure out a way to get a crochet hook size for your yarn. So once you have done that, we're going to get into crochet. Now, the way crocheting is going to work is I'm going to talk you through it, and then I will show you a slow motion scene right after of me repeating what it is that's happening, so you can really see how I do it. So you don't need to slow it down on your own, hopefully, but if you ever get frustrated, make sure to pause it, replay it if you need to, and take a break as well if you need to. This video is going to get pretty long, so the biggest thing that you can do is just have patience. In the beginning, it's going to be very difficult. So we're starting off with plushies. So crocheting in the round, which is the harder part of crocheting. There's two different ways you can crochet in the row, so back and forth, or in the round in a circle. Crocheting in a circle is a little bit tedious, but once it's started, it is really easy to continue on. It's just the starting part that's hard. In the crochet world, you're going to hear two different terms. You're going to hear magic ring or the chain 2 method, and you might hear some other terms too, but those are the two main ones. So the magic ring and the chain 2 method, they're ways of starting working in the round. Today I'll be showing you how to do the chain 2 method. Now, before we get into this, I do want to stress that if you ever come across a tutorial that says use the magic ring or the chain 2 method, they're completely interchangeable. Use whichever method you prefer for the pattern. You're not going to notice it in the end. It's just two different methods, two different techniques, but they're the same result. We're going to begin with the chain 2 method, and that's what I'll be showing you how to do today. You're going to take the end of your yarn and you're going to make 2 fingers, and you're going to wrap this yarn around your 2 fingers and hold it with your thumb. And then taking the yarn, wrap it around the back of your fingers, and then come back to the front and cross it like that. So make an X and then hook it just like that. So you'll have an X on this side and 2 tails on this side, 2 yarn. So you're going to take your hook, you're going to go under the one, over the other, and pull this one through. And now you're just going to take that off your fingers and you'll have a knot, and you're just going to tighten it like that. So the reason I make the slip knot this way is because this tail right here controls how the knot closes, and you want this to be the case because you want to be able to close it while we're working with it. So now we're going to talk about how you hold the hook. There's lots of different ways out there to do it, and you can hold it any way you feel comfortable. There's nothing set about this. I like to hold it by just putting my hand over it like that. Now I use my pointer. And then for holding the yarn with your other hand, I like to just wrap it under my index finger like this, and then turn over and pinch it with my pinky and sometimes my index finger while working like this. So if that tension is too loose for you, what you can do is wrap it around your pinky and then your pointer, and then start working. So those are 2 different ways to do it. If you have an easier way of doing it, if you just experiment a bit and find something that's more comfortable, use that. It's not a big deal. But I like to grab it with my pinky and put my pointer under it like that. So now we're going to start our first stitch. So the first stitch is our chain stitch. And this is our foundation stitch for almost everything we do. Chaining works is by yarning over and pulling it through your hook, through the loop on your hook, just like that. So we're gonna do that one more time, and you wanna try and keep a really loose tension. If your tension is too tight, it'll be really hard to pull the hook through. And I'm gonna show you how to do that one more time. So you yarn over just by going under the yarn, and you're gonna turn your hook slightly, because when you look at the circle, it's kind of like an oval shape, and you want your hook to go through that point of it. So you turn it slightly when you chain to make it easier. So now we're going to go through what the chain looks like. So here we have 2 chains. So this little knot right here, this little piece right here, that is the slip knot. That doesn't count as a stitch. Now, when we go up and we count, we see 1 V, that's 1 chain, and 2 V's, that's the second chain. You don't count the loop on your hook. That is your working yarn, it isn't a stitch. So now we're going to learn a new stitch. We are going to learn how to single crochet. Now, what we're going to have to do is insert our hook into the first chain that we made. So you're going to be skipping that second chain and working in through the first one, yarn over and pull through. And you'll have 2 loops on your hook. Now you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops, just like that. Had to close my curtains so that you could see the lights a little bit better. So that was 1 single crochet finished, and we're going to repeat this 5 more times into that first chain loop. We're going to repeat it a total of 6 times, and try and keep count as you go, but if you can't, I will be showing you how to count the stitches at the end of this round. So we just finished our first single crochet, and we're going to single crochet 6 more times. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And there we have 3 single crochets, and we're going to repeat that 3 more times for a total of 6 single crochets. So now when you have 6 single crochets, your piece will look like this. And you can just pull up a little bit of loop and take the crochet hook out so that we can count our stitches. So when you're looking at this piece, you want to take your spare tail and close the loop. Depending on your yarn, it might be a little difficult, so keep that in mind. If it's too hard to close it all the way, I like to do it after the second round. So keep that in mind, and we will also be securing this tail so it can't come loose later, but we'll do that after round 2. So we just finished round 1. We have our working loop here, doesn't count as a stitch. These V's right here, they count as a stitch. So here's 1 V, 2, 3 V, 4, 5, and then 6 V. And then you'll have a little bit of a loop right here. That's our chain 2, which we're not counting as a stitch. Just ignore this piece right here. So now, putting your crochet hook back on your piece, once you've confirmed you have 6 single crochets, we're going to start round 2. So take your stitch marker if you have one, otherwise a bobbin pin or a scrap piece of yarn will work, and you're going to insert it through the V stitch right behind the crochet hook. So this is the last stitch of your round. So when you start working in this stitch, you'll know that you've finished your round. So when working through single crochets, we work through both loops on the hook. So we go straight through the V through both those loops. You don't want to pick up one or the other, you want to pick up both. And what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet, just like we did for the first round. And we're actually going to increase in this stitch. And the way you increase is just by putting 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So in that same stitch that we just worked in, insert your hook again and single crochet. And there you see we have 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. Now this might be kind of hard to look at when you're a beginner, but as you get more and more used to crocheting, you'll figure out how to count those stitches a little bit easier. Now in the remaining 5 stitches of this round, we will be increasing in all of them. So 2 single crochets in each stitch. This is called an increase. And there we go, that is the end of round 2. When you get to that final stitch, just work right into it. If you can't get into there because of the stitch marker, take it out and finish the stitch. So now at this point, we can pull our tail fully closed if you haven't managed to close it already, just like that. And we're going to quickly count our stitches before moving on. If you're a beginner and you've never done this before, I highly recommend counting each round because it'll help you to identify stitches as you continue to learn. So we see 1 V, 2 V, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And that's where our V stops. Again, don't count the loop that's on your hook. That doesn't count as a stitch. So now reset your stitch marker and you're going to put it on that last stitch of our round. Once again, close it up so it doesn't fall out. And now we're going to start round 3. So round 3, we are going to begin by increasing in that first stitch, just like we did with our previous round, single crochet, 2 in the same stitch. Then we're going to do something a little bit different. In the next stitch, we're just going to put 1 single crochet. So we increased and then we single crocheted 1. So no, just 1 single crochet in that next stitch. And you're going to repeat this, the increase and then the single crochet 6 times around. If you're sensing a theme where everything is done in a multiple of 6, you are correct. Because we started with 6 stitches, every round afterward will have a multiple of 6 in them. So in the next stitch, you can increase and then single crochet and repeat those all the way around. You should have to do this 6 times. Once you've come all the way back around, that is the end of round 3, and you should hopefully see that your work is getting a lot bigger. So reset your stitch marker in that last stitch, and here's round 3. What we're going to do next is we're going to secure this tail. No matter what method you're using for crocheting in the round, you always should secure this tail on the inside, because this tail can come loose with time. If it can open, if it can close, it can open. That's what I meant to say. So if you have your needle, thread it and work through any one of the loops on the back side. It doesn't really matter where you put it. Just hook it somewhere on the back side and pull it nice and tight. And then we're going to repeat this once more, going right through the piece, pull up a loop, and you'll have an archway. You want to slip your needle under it to create a knot and pull tight. And you can do this as many times as you'd like. 2 or 3 times is usually plenty. And then when you flip it back over, you won't be able to see the knot on the front side, but it's not going to come loose as quickly over time. The other way that you can do it, I forgot to show you, if you don't have a needle yet, you can use your hook. It can be a little bit tight to get in there, but you can pull up one of these loops. Because we're working with this type of yarn, it can be a little bit harder to get into one of the loops. But you can do it, and I highly recommend doing this step, especially since we're working on a fidget toy. It will be played with and used a lot. This will just prevent the piece from coming apart as quickly. I think because I already sewed in here, it's getting hard to put the hook in. But what you'll do is you'll just put your hook through, grab your yarn and wrap it around your hook, pull through, and then yarn over and pull through that loop, and then just pull it all the way out. And this will create a knot on the back side so that the piece can't come undone. So now we're going to move on to round 4. And round 4 is very similar to round 3, except instead of single crocheting just 1, we'll be single crocheting 2 in between each increase. So in that first stitch, you're going to increase and then single crochet 2, and you'll repeat this all the way around. And there we are, finished round 4. Now I'd like to take a second to let you know that if you're starting to get the hang of it, it is okay to tear this work apart and start again. If your pieces are looking a little jagged and you're starting to figure out how to crochet evenly, then pull it out and start again if you want to. Otherwise, we can continue with the pattern. I just want you to know that pulling it out isn't failure, it's trying again, because you've never done this before. Or if you have and you haven't had a good time doing it, it's okay to tear this piece out and start again. It's also okay if it doesn't look like this piece. As long as the stitch count is the same, you will be perfectly fine. And at this point, the stitch count should be 24 stitches, which we're gonna go ahead and count together. So starting right after our first stitch, you'll see 1V, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So if your stitch count is 24, then you are good to continue on no matter what it looks like. And this might take you several tries to figure out how to crochet this, and that is perfectly fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually just single crochet in every stitch around. So no increasing at all, just one single crochet in every stitch. And we're actually going to do this for 4 rounds. It's a lot of rounds, but this will also give you lots of practice with the single crochet. What you could do is use some of your tools to count. Say you have some safety eyes like I do. For every round you complete, just scooch one piece over. And you can do the same thing with your needles or whatever you have on hand. You can also get your phone and look up I forgot the word, but to keep track of your rounds, you can look up, I'll put it on the screen because I can't think of it right now. For the next 4 rounds, we will be single crocheting in each stitch around, which I will be going with you. If you're going a lot slower, that is perfectly fine. You can pause me whenever, you can slow me down, you can make my voice super slow-mo. That is not a big deal at all. And if you do have to pause it and take a break, do that as well. It is good for you. Just try it, take a break, and come back to it when you can. So let's get our 4 single crochet rounds in. So I've been crocheting for about 10 years. My grandma introduced it to me when I was really young, and for like the first 3 or 4 years I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrible. I never looked up tutorials, or I very rarely did, and I kind of just guessed on how to do it. So I made things like coasters, and they were awful. Some of the wonkiest shapes you will have ever seen in your life. And I thought that that was all there was to crochet, like 3 stitches, and that there's nothing else to crochet. And I was a little confused on how people could make more things. Well, one day I went to a craft fair with my mom, and she sells beautiful jewelry. Well, she used to sell beautiful jewelry. She doesn't do it anymore, but anyways, there was a craft vendor right next door to us, and she was crocheting in a double crochet, which is a type of stitch. And it blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, there's more to crochet than what I was doing. And it like lit a fire in me that I just had to learn how to do that. So I started crocheting, and it actually wasn't until a few years ago when I actually started this YouTube channel that I really started to see a major improvement in my work. And that's because I was crocheting off and on, and I wasn't really trying to learn how to be better at that point. I wasn't on Instagram or YouTube, so I wasn't looking at what other people were doing. So I didn't feel that pressure to grow. But when I started my YouTube channel in an attempt to start helping my family with a little bit of cash, I realized that I actually have a lot to improve on, and that's where I'm at now. A couple years later, and my pieces look really good. I'm finally at the point where I'm pretty proud of my things, which I know is probably really strange to hear coming from me, especially if you've seen my things and my work. But I don't know, it just wasn't until recently that I really started feeling like, hey, I really like my work. And so I want you guys to keep in mind that when you start crocheting, it's going to be a mental battle more than a physical battle. It's going to be harder to want to do it because you're comparing yourself to all these people, and you don't need to. Everyone started somewhere. Everyone had poor beginnings. That's just how it works. And with all the amazing resources that are available today, so many beginners that I've seen, they're at my skill level when I started my YouTube, you know, like that, like intermediate, and they've only been crocheting for a couple months. So I guarantee you, if you work on it as much as you can without breaking your wrists or your joints, that you will improve really quickly. So I hope you enjoyed that little pep talk. I just finished my single crochet rounds and I actually want to show you how to count your rounds if you lost count. If you have a hard time seeing what I'm saying, then that is perfectly fine. It does take a little bit of mastery to figure this out. The more you crochet, the more you can visualize it, and then you'll be able to see what I'm talking about easier. So when we look at the bottom of our piece, you can actually count the rounds. So this circle in the middle is round 1, round 2, 3, and 4. So we know that we had 4 increase rounds. So this is our last increase round. So if you lose count and you need to count your single crochets, then you should have a total of 8 rounds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can see that the single crochets have a bit of a V shape, just like the top of them do. So if you lose count, you can count the entire thing, or if you can spot the increases like I can, you can count all the way up from there. So now at this point, we're actually going to change color. And this isn't super complicated. I'm going to be walking you through it, but we're going to be learning a new stitch. It's called the slip stitch. Now the slip stitch works by inserting our hook into our next stitch, yarning over and pulling through that cloth and then actually through the other loop on our hook. So pull through all the loops on your hook, and then we're going to chain 1. Now we are going to fasten off, or finish off as some people say. Basically, we're just going to cut our yarn. You just need a tiny little tail, and we're going to pull it through all the way through the chain, just like that. You can pull it a little bit tight. And that is the end of our colored round. So now we're going to change colors, and we're going to use our secondary color, and this can be any color you'd like. As soon as I can get it to unravel, there we go. So now we're going to make a slip knot onto our hook, and this is actually going to be a different slip knot. So this slip knot will be where our working end controls the slip, so it can't come undone if we pull on this tail. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to hold our tail in our hand. We're going to wrap it around our fingers like we did before, create an X on the back, and then 2 straight lines on the front. And we're going to go under and pull through that second yarn and then pull that knot tight like that. And now if you test your slip knot, this working end will pull the slip shut, which is what you want it to do for this. I like to use this slip knot for working in rows or for steps like this, and you'll have to use the other slip knot for the working in the round. So now at this point, we're going to learn how to decrease. To make this easier on beginners, what we're going to do is we're going to start with single crocheting, and then we'll decrease. Usually what I do is decrease on top of these, but that can be really confusing. So if we're looking at our work, this is our slip stitch right here. It's right under the chain. This is where you're going to put your first single crochet. I like to put it on top of that slip stitch because it makes the color change a little cleaner. Now in the next stitch, the stitch right here, we're going to single crochet normally. And now we are going to learn a new stitch. Now this stitch is called a decrease, and there's multiple ways to do it. I'll be showing you how to do both ways, and you can decide which one's easier. So if you're looking at your piece, you're going to insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through. And instead of finishing your single crochet, you can insert into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through. Now you have 3 loops on your hook, and you're going to pull through all 3. Now this is a regular decrease, so you're basically putting 2 stitches and combining them into 1. I'm going to take this out and show you the way I decrease, which is what I call the invisible decrease. It's not what I call, it's what people call. So the invisible decrease, here you have our 2 loops. So this is our front loop, and this is our back loop. We're actually just going to be working in the front loop. We're going to pull up that front loop and immediately go into the next stitch and pull up that front loop as well. Now, what we're going to do is yarn over and pull through both those loops. Just like that, yarn over and finish the single crochet. So what this does is it gives it a little bit more of a regular single crochet look, I recommend doing the first decrease though, so that you can see it a little bit easier as a beginner, but you can do it either way. You just have to keep count of your stitches. So now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet 2 and we're going to decrease all the way around, and we're going to do that 6 times total. Once you've come all the way back around, what we're going to do is we're just going to work directly into our single crochet. We're not going to do anything special, so just insert your hook into the next stitch and single crochet as normal, and that is the first stitch of our next round. If you're using your stitch marker, mark that stitch that we ended off, so that final decrease, and that's the beginning of the end of our round. So now for this next round, we're going to be single crocheting and then decreasing in the next stitch, and we're going to do that 6 times. So just like round 2, or the previous round, not round 2, except one less single crochet between the decreases. So before continuing any further, you can just tuck these tails into your piece. The way we color changed, the knot is secure, so there's no need to tie anything. You can just push them right into the cap of the mushroom. To finish my final decrease, I will be removing my stitch marker, just like so. Now at this point, we have the top of our mushroom, and if you fold it in, you can see where we're at. So this is where the piece can get a little bit tight, but I know you can do it. What we're going to do is we're going to decrease in each stitch around. So by the time we're done, we'll have 6 stitches total, and this can be a little bit tight to work with, but I guarantee you can do it. If you've gotten this far, you can absolutely beat this. For that final decrease, I'll be removing the stitch marker because it's a bit tight, like I've been saying. Now at this point, you'll have 6 stitches, and you should be able to count them. And it'll be really tight to work in this with the stitch marker. So what I recommend doing is just counting, keeping track of what you're doing and counting for the next 2 rounds. But you can also put the stitch marker back if you'd like. So what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet in each stitch around. So we're going to single crochet 6 and single crochet 6 again. So you can just count 12, and those will be your 2 rounds. There are those 2 rounds finished. Hopefully you have managed to finish them as well. I'm sure you did if you're still here. I know that can be a pretty tight squeeze, but I know you also can do it. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to increase in each stitch around. So we're going to take our stitch count up to 12. So just put 2 single crochets in each stitch. There we are. That's the end of the increase round. You can see we have our little head forming now. Reset your stitch marker, and what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet in each stitch around for 2 rounds. And there we are. We only have 1 round left and we are finished. So if you've made it this far, I want you to give yourself a round of applause because you have made it so far and we're almost done. So now at this point you can use safety eyes if you'd like. What you'll do is you'll insert them between the 2 single crochet rounds that we just did. So if you look at this, just in between right there. And you can just put them as far apart as you'd like or as close together as you'd like, just like so. I will not be attaching these though because I want to show you how to stitch them on if you don't have the ability to get safety eyes at this moment. I know it can be pretty hard to find tiny ones in stores, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish our last round. And our last round will be decreasing in each stitch around. So just like we did earlier, we are going to decrease in each stitch around. And once you have done 3 of them, we're actually going to stuff the head portion. So you're just gonna need a tiny bit of stuffing. And you're just gonna put it right into there, pinch the bottom of the head, technically the top of the head, so that you don't stuff the fidget part, because that's the part that needs to stay unstuffed. So you want this to be pretty light, you just want it to keep its shape when you move it. If you are sewing your eyes on, you want it to be slightly lighter, because we will be filling it up with the yarn that we'll be sewing. So now at this point, finish your decrease round, so the final 3 decreases. I like to take stitch marker out for that last stitch. There we are. And now in the next stitch, we're going to slip stitch. So yarn over and insert through, pull through all those loops, chain 1 and fasten off. You're going to need a little bit of a tail because we have 1 step left, which is closing this up. So leave a bit of a tail for sewing. Now at this point, before we close up our piece, I will be stitching the eyes on and showing you how to do that. And you could also test the mushroom at this point. If you're working with acrylic yarn like I am, the mushroom will be a little bit stiffer, but it is still very poppable, very cute. Let me get some of that yarn real quick and we will stitch the eyes on. Okay, so you're just gonna need a bit of yarn. You can use any color you'd like in basically any yarn type you want. I'll just be using a little bit of black. And what we're gonna do is thread our needle. So this is the point where you will need a needle to sew up the eyes, but for the most part, we haven't really had the need for the needle yet. So if you're stitching the eyes on, you can try and get away with using your hook to do it, but it can be really difficult to get in there and not pull stuffing out and everything. So keep that in mind. So here's our decrease round, here's our single crochet round. We're gonna go in between those two and pull up a loop. You wanna leave a tiny tail long enough so that you can tie a knot when we're finished. Now, directly above this stitch, we're going to pull our yarn through and just create a little eyeball. Now, you can pull as tight as you like at this point, and you can make the eye as big as you want. So the more you stitch, the bigger the eye will become. I like to do 2 or 3 like that and pull pretty tight. So now what we're gonna do is take this tail back through the body and come out to where we want our other eye. From what I can tell, the farther apart, the more angry it looks, and the closer, the sweeter it looks. So keep that in mind. Now we're gonna repeat the same thing on the other side. So just create little loops and pull it through. And when you're finished, you can just pull the tail out through the center. Just like that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie these two tails together. You don't wanna tie them too tight because you'll pull the eyes in, but just tight enough that everything is fairly secured. Now, I will be trimming these tails because there's no way I'll be able to fit them in the body. If you're working with a really dark yarn, you would want to trim this because you can see it through the stitches if you're working with a light color and a dark eye color. So keep that in mind. I like to stuff this in with my scissors. You can try and do it with your fingers or your, I forgot what I was gonna say, stuffing stick, or the end of a pencil even. So there, once it's all tucked in, your eyes are finished, and honestly, I think these are cuter. They're less likely to hurt you than the plastic eyes, especially since this is a fidget toy. But it's, of course, up to you on whether you use safety eyes or not. So if you don't have a needle, you can use your crochet hook instead. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be inserting our yarn through the front loops of each stitch. And this is just going to leave a really nice closed hole. So if you're using your crochet hook, insert your hook through that front loop and pull the yarn all the way through, just like that. And you want to repeat that with every single stitch all the way around. If you have a sewing needle on hand, let me get my smaller one, I dropped it. Here we are. If you have a smaller one on hand, I forgot to mention though, there is a trick to thread your needle where you don't have to do this for a million years. Just fold the tail over and push the loop through. And that's how I do it. I know I already thread the needle and didn't show you earlier, which I feel a little bit bad, but that's how I like to do it for ease. So now what we're gonna do is just insert our needle through each front loop and pull tight as we go. And then once you get all the way around, you can pull tight. And I like to insert my needle through a couple of the loops we already went through just to make that circle complete, like so. Now we're going to secure our tail by pulling up a loop, inserting our needle through it, and pulling it tight. You want to do this with any piece you're working on just to secure that tail. Now what we're going to do is just weave our tail in through the doll, so through the head of the piece, back, forth, and back. So I like to weave it in 3 times to make sure that tail isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And when you're doing this, stay in the head area and try and go in between stitches and not over stitches. And when you're done, you can just trim that tail and push the little end in. And there you have your very own popping mushroom. If you need me to slow down any other part of this, make sure to leave a comment and I can add additional tutorials to this pattern. If you need another thing, if you need to explain something a little differently, let me know in the comments. And also, I'm planning on doing another episode in this series where I will be teaching you how to crochet my little axolotl, which I'll put on the screen here. If you're interested in that, make sure to leave a comment and let me know. If you would like me to teach you how to do something else on my channel, you can also leave a comment and let me know. I have lots of free patterns that I would love to do slow down tutorials like this for, so if you're interested in something else, make sure to leave a comment and let me know. If this was helpful to you, make sure to share it with other people so that they can use it too, especially if you've got a big friend group and they want to crochet too. It is really nice to have other crocheters to talk to about anything, really. So I highly recommend getting the whole family into it if you can, the whole group, friend group, anything. So I think that is about it for today's tutorial. Like I said, make sure to leave a comment if you want me to show you to do anything else. If you made your own poppy mushroom and it is your very first project, please let me know in the comments because I absolutely love hearing your success stories. And even if it frustrated you and you still had a poppy mushroom at the end, that is a success story in my book. So make sure to leave that comment down there. I will see you in my next video, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope your poppy mushroom makes you smile. With all that said, I will see you later. Bye!